Across the galaxy, there exists a single word that can silence entire armadas, halt invasions mid-flight, and turn the most bloodthirsty conquerors into cautious diplomats. That word is human. But Princess Zaratiel of the Valdorian Empire didn't know this when she agreed to marry the mysterious heir of a distant world called Earth. She thought it was just another political alliance, another sacrifice for peace between warring civilizations. She was about to discover why her empire's greatest generals wake up screaming from nightmares about a small blue planet on the galaxy's edge. Why ancient treaties specifically exclude one particular species from certain sectors of space. Why the most advanced civilizations in the universe maintain a careful, respectful distance from Sol system. The marriage was meant to stop a war. Instead, it was about to start the most terrifying education the galaxy had ever witnessed about why you never ever threaten what humans consider family. Welcome to a universe where humanity's reputation precedes them, and one princess is about to learn exactly why empires fear the species they call the Quiet Ones. Princess Zaratiel stood at the viewport of the diplomatic vessel, watching the stars streak past in patterns she didn't recognize. The journey to Earth would take 3 standard cycles, and she had spent most of the first one trying not to think about what awaited her at the destination. An arranged marriage to end a war. It was a tale as old as civilization itself, played out across countless worlds throughout the galaxy. The only difference this time was that she knew absolutely nothing about her intended husband or his species. "Your Highness," came a gravelly voice behind her. She turned to see General Mordhac approaching, his scaled features creased with what she had learned to recognize as concern. "Perhaps you should review the cultural briefings again." Zaratiel suppressed a bitter laugh. "What cultural briefings? We have 3 pages of basic information about human physiology and a note that says approach with standard diplomatic protocols. I know more about the eating habits of Centaurian slugworms than I do about my future husband's people." The general's expression darkened. The diplomatic corps insisted that was sufficient. They said the humans were cooperative. Something in his tone made her pause. In all her years knowing Mordhac, she had never heard that particular inflection in his voice. It wasn't quite fear, but it was something close to it. "Mordhac, is there something you're not telling me?" The old soldier looked around the observation deck, ensuring they were alone. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "There are stories, Your Highness. Old stories from the Frontier Wars." "The Frontier Wars ended before I was born," Zaratiel said dismissively. "What could they possibly have to do with this marriage alliance?" "Everything," Mordhac said grimly. "The wars didn't end because of treaties or negotiations, Princess. They ended because both sides agreed to leave one particular sector of space completely alone." A chill ran down Zaratiel's spine. "What sector?" "The one containing Earth." She stared at him in disbelief. "That's impossible. Earth is just a minor world on the galactic rim. Our intelligence reports show they barely achieved basic spaceflight. They don't even have faster-than-light travel." "Our intelligence reports show what they want us to see," Mordhac corrected. "Princess, I've served in the Imperial Navy for 47 years. I've fought in 12 major conflicts and commanded fleets that conquered entire star systems. But there's only one enemy that ever made Admiral Karath himself order a full retreat. Admiral Karath was a legend in the Valdorian Empire, known for his ruthless tactics and absolute refusal to back down from any fight. The idea that anything could make him retreat was almost incomprehensible." "What happened?" Zaratiel asked. Mordhac was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the stars. "We were part of a joint expedition with the Hegemony and the Zephyrian Collective. 3 of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy, working together to establish control over the Outer Rim territories. We had a fleet of over 2,000 ships." He paused, and Zaratiel could see his hands trembling slightly. "We encountered a single human vessel. One ship stopped 3 fleets?" "Not stopped," Mordhac said quietly. "Destroyed. All of them." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Zaratiel felt her legs grow weak, and she gripped the viewport railing for support. "That's not possible," she whispered. "The humans didn't even fire the first shot," Mordhac continued. Admiral Koroth demanded they surrender and submit to Imperial authority. They refused. They said their space was off limits, and they would defend it. So what happened then? Koroth ordered the attack. 3,000 ships opened fire on one human vessel. Morthack's voice grew even quieter. The human ship didn't move. It didn't evade or retreat. It just sat there and took everything we could throw at it. Zaratiel's mind reeled. Their shields must have been incredibly advanced. They didn't have shields, Morthack said. The energy readings showed they were taking direct hits to their hull. We were tearing them apart, piece by piece. And then. What? Then, they started laughing. The general's words sent ice through Zaratiel's veins. Laughing? Over the communication channels. We could hear them laughing as their ship was being destroyed around them. And then, one of them spoke. Morthack's voice became barely audible. He said, "Thank you for giving us your exact positions. Our friends will be with you shortly." Zaratiel felt sick. What friends? 27,000 human ships decloaked around the entire combined fleet, Morthack said simply. They had been there the whole time, waiting. Watching. The single ship we were destroying was bait. What happened to our fleets? Gone. All of them. In less than 6 hours, the humans dismantled the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. They didn't just win, Princess. They made it look easy. Zaratiel slumped against the viewport, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. But, why haven't I heard these stories? Why isn't this common knowledge? Because every government in the galaxy agreed to classify the information and never speak of it again, Morthack explained. The humans made it clear that they had no interest in conquest or expansion. They just wanted to be left alone. So a treaty was signed, declaring their space off limits to all external forces. And now I'm supposed to marry one of them, Zaratiel said weakly. Princess, there's something else you need to understand about humans, Morthack said gently. After the battle, they didn't execute prisoners or demand tribute. They gave medical aid to survivors and escorted damaged ships to safe ports. They fought with terrifying efficiency, but once the fighting stopped, they showed mercy to their enemies. Zaratiel looked up at him with hope in her eyes. So they're not monsters? No, Your Highness. There's something far more dangerous than monsters. Morthack met her gaze steadily. They're intelligent, compassionate, and capable of incomprehensible violence when threatened. They fight not for conquest or glory, but to protect what they love. The princess felt a new kind of fear settling in her stomach. And I'm supposed to become what they love? According to human custom, marriage creates family bonds, Morthack said. And, based on what we witnessed, there is nothing in the universe more protected than a human family. Before Zaratiel could respond, an announcement echoed through the ship's communication system. Attention all passengers. We are now entering the Sol system. Earth approach in 12 hours. Zaratiel looked out the viewport and saw a modest yellow star growing larger in the distance. Somewhere near that star was a small blue planet that had somehow become the most feared location in the galaxy. Morthack, she said quietly, when we arrive, I want you to observe everything. Study their technology, their behavior, their capabilities. If this marriage is meant to prevent a war, I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Of course, Your Highness. And, Morthack? Not a word of this conversation to anyone else on the ship. If the diplomatic corps wanted me to know the truth about humans, they would have told me. The general nodded grimly. Understood. As the ship continued its approach to Earth, Zaratiel found herself wondering what kind of man she was about to marry. Was he like the warriors who had destroyed 3 fleets without breaking a sweat? Or was he more like the medics who had tended to enemy wounded after the battle? Perhaps, she realized with growing unease, he was both. The stars continued to stream past the viewport, carrying her toward a destiny she was only beginning to understand. In less than 12 hours, she would meet her future husband and begin to learn why the most powerful empires in the galaxy spoke of humans only in whispers. She just hoped she would live long enough to understand what she had gotten herself into. The diplomatic vessel continued its approach to Earth, unaware that its arrival had triggered protocols that would soon reveal exactly why human space was considered forbidden territory. Deep in the ship's communication systems, encrypted messages were already being transmitted to destinations across the galaxy. The Valdorian princess was about to discover that marrying a human meant joining the most protected family in the universe. She was also about to learn that some protections came with a price that few could imagine paying. But, for now, she simply watched the stars and tried to prepare herself for whatever awaited her on the blue planet ahead. Earth was beautiful. As the Valdorian diplomatic vessel approached the blue-green planet, Princess Zaratiel found herself pressed against the viewport, marveling at the swirling clouds and vast oceans below. It looked so peaceful, so ordinary. Nothing about it suggested that this world harbored the most feared military force in the galaxy. "Approaching Earth Orbital Station," announced the ship's pilot. "We're being guided to Docking Bay 7. Through the viewport, Zaratiel could see the orbital station growing larger. It appeared to be a standard diplomatic facility, similar to those she had visited on dozens of other worlds. No visible weapons, no massive defense platforms, no signs of the military might that had supposedly destroyed 3 entire fleets. Perhaps the stories were exaggerated, she murmured to herself. General Mordhack, standing beside her, shook his head slowly. "Princess, look more closely at the station's construction." She studied the structure more carefully. At first glance, it seemed unremarkable, but, as her eyes adjusted to the details, she began to notice peculiarities. The metal was unlike anything she had seen before, with a subtle shimmer that seemed to bend light around it. The docking bays were larger than necessary for diplomatic vessels, and there were sections of the station that seemed to exist in a state of constant, barely perceptible flux. "What am I looking at?" she asked. "Technology we don't understand," Mordhack replied grimly. Before she could ask more questions, a new voice crackled over the communication system. The accent was distinctly human, with a warm, friendly tone that immediately put her at ease. "Valdorian vessel, this is Earth Station Control. Welcome to the Sol System. Princess Zaratiel, your future husband is waiting to greet you personally in Docking Bay 7. Zaratiel felt her heart skip a beat. In just a few minutes, she would meet the man she was destined to marry. Despite everything Mordhack had told her, she found herself curious rather than terrified. "Thank you, Station Control," she responded. "We appreciate the warm welcome." "Our pleasure, Your Highness." "And, Princess? Congratulations on your upcoming marriage. The whole planet is excited about the wedding." The communication ended, leaving Zaratiel staring at the speaker in surprise. The enthusiasm in the human's voice had seemed genuine, not the practiced diplomacy she was accustomed to. 20 minutes later, the ship docked with a gentle thrum that barely registered through the hull. Zaratiel stood in the airlock, flanked by General Mordhack and a small security detail, waiting for the doors to open. She had changed into her formal diplomatic robes, a flowing ensemble of deep purple silk that marked her status as a member of the Valdorian royal family. The airlock cycled, and the doors opened to reveal a reception chamber filled with humans. Zaratiel's first impression was how remarkably ordinary they looked. They were bipedal, roughly her own height, with varying skin tones and hair colors. No claws, no visible weapons, no obvious signs of the deadly capabilities Mordhack had described. At the center of the group stood a young man who could only be her intended husband. He was tall by human standards, with dark hair and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore simple but elegant clothing, and, when he smiled at her, she felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest. "Princess Zaratiel," he said, stepping forward and offering a respectful bow. "I'm Marcus Chen, and I am deeply honored to meet you." His voice was calm and confident, with no trace of the arrogance she had learned to expect from royal suitors. When he looked at her, she felt as though he was truly seeing her, not just evaluating a potential political asset. "The honor is mine," she replied, offering the traditional Valdorian greeting gesture. Marcus smiled wider. "I hope the journey wasn't too difficult. Interstellar travel can be exhausting." "It was quite comfortable, thank you." Zaratiel found herself studying his face, searching for any hint of the dangerous capabilities Mordhak had described. All she saw was genuine warmth and what appeared to be nervous excitement. "If you don't mind me asking," Marcus continued, "this is your first visit to Earth, isn't it?" "Yes, it is." "Then, you absolutely have to see the gardens before we discuss anything formal. Earth's biodiversity is one of our greatest treasures." The suggestion was so unexpected that Zaratiel almost laughed. Here was a man whose species had apparently terrified the galaxy's greatest military leaders, and he wanted to show her flowers. "I would like that very much," she said. Marcus gestured toward a corridor leading deeper into the station. "Wonderful. The gardens are this way." As they walked, Zaratiel became aware of subtle details she had initially missed. The humans moved with a fluid grace that spoke of excellent physical conditioning. Their eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, not with paranoia, but with the automatic awareness of trained professionals. And, despite their friendly demeanor, she noticed that they maintained a protective formation around Marcus without seeming to do so deliberately. The gardens were spectacular. The station's central section opened into a vast dome filled with plants from across Earth's surface. Trees, flowers, and vines created a living tapestry of colors and scents that took Zaratiel's breath away. "This is incredible," she said, genuinely amazed. "How do you maintain such biodiversity in space?" "Careful environmental controls and a lot of love," Marcus replied. "Humans have always been gardeners at heart. We take pieces of home with us wherever we go." They walked along a winding path between flowering bushes and small trees. The air was warm and humid, filled with the sound of running water and what Zaratiel realized was birdsong. "You have live birds here?" she asked in wonder. "A small population, yes. They help maintain the ecosystem balance." Marcus paused beside a fountain where several small, brightly colored birds were drinking. "Princess, may I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Are you nervous about this arrangement? I know political marriages can be complicated." His directness surprised her. Most diplomats would have spent hours on ceremonial pleasantries before broaching such a topic. "I am," she admitted. "I know very little about your people or your customs. I'm afraid I might inadvertently cause offense." Marcus laughed, a rich, genuine sound that made her smile in response. "Trust me, humans are very difficult to offend." "We're probably more worried about offending you." "Somehow I doubt that," Zaratiel said dryly. "Why do you say that?" She studied his face carefully. "May I be equally direct with you, Marcus?" "Please." "I've heard stories about human military capabilities. Stories that suggest your people are far more dangerous than they appear." Marcus's expression didn't change, but Zaratiel noticed that the other humans in the garden had suddenly become very still. It was subtle, but unmistakable. "What kind of stories?" Marcus asked quietly. "Stories about the frontier wars. About what happened to the joint fleets that tried to enter human space." For a moment, Marcus said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice had taken on a different quality, still warm but with an underlying steel that made Zaratiel's spine straighten involuntarily. "Those fleets came here with the intention of conquering our worlds and enslaving our people," he said simply. "We defended ourselves." "Against 3,000 ships?" "Numbers don't matter when you're protecting your family," Marcus replied. "Princess, may I show you something that might help you understand?" Without waiting for an answer, he led her to a section of the garden where a holographic display materialized in the air. The image showed Earth as seen from space, beautiful and serene. "This is our home," Marcus said. 7 billion people live on that planet. They're farmers and teachers and artists and scientists. They're parents and children and grandparents. They dream and laugh and love and hope for a better future." The image shifted, showing scenes from Earth's surface. Cities full of life, families in parks, children playing, couples dancing, elderly people gardening. "When those fleets arrived at the edge of our system," Marcus continued, "they sent a message demanding our immediate surrender. They said our people would be relocated to work camps and our planet would be strip-mined for resources. Zaratiel felt a chill run down her spine. I didn't know. The families you see in these images would have been separated forever. The children would have grown up as slaves. The elderly would have been left to die. Our entire civilization would have been erased. The holographic display changed again, showing the massive alien fleets approaching Earth. So we did what humans do when our families are threatened, Marcus said, his voice now carrying an edge that made the air in the garden seem suddenly colder. We protected them. How? Zaratiel asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. With extreme prejudice, Marcus replied simply. The display showed the human fleet decloaking around the alien vessels. Even in holographic form, the sight was overwhelming. The human ships moved with perfect coordination, their weapons precise and devastating. We didn't want to fight, Marcus continued. We tried diplomacy first. We offered to share technology and resources. We suggested trade agreements and cultural exchanges. But they came here to destroy everything we love. The hologram showed the aftermath of the battle. Alien ships disabled but not destroyed, survivors being rescued and given medical treatment. Even then, we showed mercy, Marcus said. We could have eliminated them all, but that's not who we are. We're only as dangerous as we need to be to protect our families. Zaratiel stared at the display, her mind reeling. The clinical efficiency of the human attack was terrifying, but what struck her most was what Marcus had said about mercy. And now I'm supposed to become part of your family, she asked quietly. Marcus turned off the holographic display and looked at her directly. Princess, this marriage was arranged by our governments to prevent another war. But I want you to know that if you choose to go through with it, you won't just be a political asset to me. You'll be my wife. You'll be family. What does that mean, exactly? Marcus smiled, and, for the first time since entering the garden, his expression was purely gentle. It means that if anyone, anywhere in the galaxy, tries to harm you or make you unhappy, they'll have to deal with not just me, but every human in the universe. The words were spoken softly, almost casually, but they hit Zaratiel like a physical blow. She looked around the garden at the other humans, who were now watching her with expressions of warm acceptance. You're all serious about this, aren't you? She said wonderingly. Princess, Marcus said, taking her hand gently, humans don't do anything halfway. When we love completely. When we protect absolutely. And, when we promise something, we keep that promise no matter what it costs us. Zaratiel felt tears forming in her eyes. In all her life, no one had ever spoken to her about protection and love with such absolute certainty. I think, she said carefully, I would very much like to be part of your family. Marcus's smile could have lit up the entire station. Then, let's start planning a wedding that the galaxy will never forget. As they walked back through the garden together, Zaratiel realized that her understanding of power had just been fundamentally altered. She had come to Earth expecting to meet a species known for their military might. Instead, she had discovered a people whose greatest strength was their capacity to love and protect those who mattered to them. She was about to become one of those people. And, somewhere in the back of her mind, she felt sorry for anyone who might be foolish enough to threaten her new family. 3 weeks after arriving on Earth, Princess Zaratiel had begun to understand why the galaxy feared humans, and it had nothing to do with their weapons. She sat in Marcus's family home, a modest dwelling nestled in the hills outside what humans called San Francisco. The morning sun streamed through large windows, illuminating a scene that would have seemed impossible to her just a month ago. She was having breakfast with Marcus's parents, two of the most dangerous people in the universe, who were currently arguing about whether to plant roses or daffodils in the spring garden. The roses would provide better coverage along the fence line, Marcus's mother, Elena, was saying as she poured Zaratiel another cup of coffee. But the daffodils are more cheerful, his father, David, countered. And they come back every year without maintenance. Zaratiel sipped her coffee and marveled at the normalcy of it all. These were the people who had planned and executed the most devastating military operation in galactic history. Elena had been the strategic coordinator for the entire human defense fleet, while David had designed the cloaking technology that had hidden 27,000 ships from the most advanced sensors in known space. They were also, she had discovered, absolutely devoted to making her feel welcome in their family. "What do you think, dear?" Elena asked her. "Roses or daffodils?" "I don't know much about earth flowers," Zaratil admitted. "But perhaps you could plant both? Different sections for different seasons?" David beamed at her. "I knew she was smart, Marcus. You chose well." Marcus laughed from across the table. "I hate to break it to you, Dad, but it was an arranged marriage. I didn't choose anything." "Details," David waved dismissively. "The important thing is that it's working out." Zaratil felt a warm glow at his words. The past 3 weeks had been a revelation. Marcus had introduced her to human culture not through formal ceremonies and diplomatic protocols, but through daily life. They had cooked meals together, walked through parks, watched human entertainment, and talked for hours about everything from philosophy to their favorite foods. She had expected to feel like an outsider, a political necessity tolerated for the sake of peace. Instead, she had found herself genuinely welcomed into a family that seemed to consider her adoption as Marcus's wife to be the most natural thing in the world. "Speaking of working out," Elena said, checking her watch, "shouldn't you two be getting ready for the ceremony rehearsal?" The wedding was scheduled for the following day, and it would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Representatives from hundreds of worlds would attend, making it the largest diplomatic gathering in recent memory. What none of those representatives knew was that they would also be witnessing the most comprehensive security operation in galactic history. "We should go," Marcus agreed, standing and kissing his mother's cheek. "Thanks for breakfast, Mom." "My pleasure." "And, Zara, dear, remember what we talked about yesterday. If anyone makes you uncomfortable during the ceremony, just give Marcus a look. He'll handle it." Zaratil nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure what handle it meant in human terms. Over the past 3 weeks, she had noticed that humans had a very particular way of dealing with problems. They were unfailingly polite and diplomatic right up until the moment someone crossed a line they shouldn't cross. Then, they became something else entirely. As they drove toward the ceremony site, Marcus was unusually quiet. Zaratil studied his profile, noting the tension in his jaw. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "Just wedding nerves," he said, but she could tell there was more to it. "Marcus, I can tell when you're not telling me something. What's really bothering you?" He was quiet for a moment before pulling the car over to a scenic overlook. Below them, San Francisco Bay stretched out in the morning sunlight, dotted with boats and framed by rolling hills. "There's something I need to tell you about tomorrow," he said finally. Something that wasn't included in the official diplomatic briefings. Zaratil felt a familiar chill. "What kind of something?" Marcus turned to face her fully. "Your government didn't just arrange this marriage to prevent a war with humans, Zara. They arranged it to prevent a war between the Valdorian Empire and the hegemony." "That's impossible," Zaratil said immediately. "The Empire and the hegemony have maintained peaceful relations for over a century." "Not anymore," Marcus said grimly. 3 months ago, hegemony forces began massing along your borders. Intelligence suggests they're planning a full-scale invasion within the next year." Zaratil stared at him in shock. "How do you know this?" "Because we've been monitoring the situation since it began. Humans don't like wars, Zara. They're messy and unpredictable, and innocent people always get caught in the middle." "But why would marrying me prevent a hegemony invasion?" Marcus's expression grew deadly serious. "Because once you become my wife, any attack on the Valdorian Empire becomes an attack on human family. And the hegemony knows exactly what that means." The implications hit Zaratil like a physical blow. "You're using me as a shield." "No," Marcus said firmly. "We're using this marriage to prevent a war that would kill millions of people. Including you." "What do you mean?" "Hegemony intelligence believes that eliminating the Valdorian royal family would destabilize your empire enough to make conquest easier. You, specifically, have been marked for assassination." Zaratil felt the world spinning around her. "You're saying they want to kill me?" "They were going to kill you," Marcus corrected. "That plan was abandoned the moment your engagement to me was announced." Killing a human's family member is the fastest way to find yourself at war with our entire species. She sat in stunned silence for several minutes, processing what she had learned. Finally, she looked at Marcus with a mixture of gratitude and something else she couldn't quite identify. So this marriage really is about protection. Among other things, Marcus said softly. Zara, I need you to understand something. Yes, this arrangement serves political purposes for both our peoples. But that doesn't change the fact that I care about you. Over these past 3 weeks, I've watched you adapt to our culture, bond with my family, and show kindness to everyone you meet. You're not just a political necessity to me anymore. What am I then? Marcus reached over and took her hand. You're my fiancée. Tomorrow, you'll be my wife. And, after that, you'll be under the protection of every human in the galaxy, not because of politics, but because that's what families do for each other. Zaratiel squeezed his hand, feeling tears form in her eyes. Marcus, I need to tell you something too. What? I was terrified when I first arrived here. The stories about human military capabilities made me think I was marrying a monster. But these past 3 weeks have shown me something completely different. What have they shown you? That humans are terrifying not because you're cruel or violent, but because you're capable of unlimited love and loyalty. You'll do anything, absolutely anything, to protect the people you care about. That level of devotion is the most frightening thing I've ever encountered. Marcus smiled. And how do you feel about that now? Incredibly lucky to be on the receiving end of it, Zaratiel admitted. They drove the rest of the way to the rehearsal in comfortable silence, both lost in thought about the ceremony that would take place the next day. When they arrived at the venue, a beautiful outdoor amphitheater overlooking the Pacific Ocean, they found it bustling with activity. Human security personnel moved through the area with quiet efficiency, their presence so subtle that most visitors wouldn't even notice them. Zaratiel, however, had learned to recognize the signs. The way certain individuals positioned themselves at strategic points, the nearly invisible communication devices, the way their eyes constantly tracked potential threats. How many security personnel are here? She asked Marcus quietly. Enough, he replied simply. The rehearsal went smoothly, with diplomats from dozens of worlds practicing their parts in the ceremony. Zaratiel noticed that the human officials were unfailingly polite to everyone, regardless of which government they represented. Even the hegemony ambassador, who had arrived that morning, was treated with perfect diplomatic courtesy. But she also noticed that the hegemony representative was never left alone, never allowed to stray from designated areas, and never permitted to approach her without Marcus or another human nearby. After the rehearsal, as guests mingled over refreshments, Ambassador Thexlar of the hegemony approached their group. He was a tall, reptilian being with cold, calculating eyes that made Zaratiel immediately uncomfortable. Princess Zaratiel, he said with a diplomatic smile that didn't reach his eyes. How wonderful to see you again. I trust you're enjoying your stay on Earth? Very much, thank you, she replied carefully. And you, Mr. Chen, Thexlar continued, turning to Marcus. Congratulations on your upcoming nuptials. I'm sure this alliance will be beneficial for all parties involved. Marcus's response was perfectly polite, but Zaratiel noticed that his posture had shifted subtly. She had learned to recognize this change in humans. It was the moment when they transitioned from diplomatic to protective mode. We're very much looking forward to tomorrow, Marcus said pleasantly. I hope you'll enjoy the ceremony. Oh, I'm certain it will be memorable, Thexlar replied. Princess, I wonder if I might speak with you privately for a moment? There are some matters of mutual interest between our governments that I'd like to discuss. Before Zaratiel could respond, Marcus stepped slightly closer to her side. I'm afraid that's not possible, Ambassador. Princess Zaratiel is currently under human protection protocols. All official communications must go through proper channels. Thexlar's expression darkened slightly. Surely a brief conversation between old allies would be acceptable? I'm sure you understand, Marcus said, his voice remaining perfectly friendly while his eyes grew cold, that we take the safety of our family members very seriously. Perhaps you could schedule a formal meeting through the diplomatic corps? The ambassador's gaze shifted between Marcus and Zaratil, and she could see him calculating something behind his reptilian features. Whatever conclusion he reached, he decided not to pursue the matter. "Of course," he said with a forced smile. "Another time, perhaps." As Thexlar moved away, Zaratil felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ocean breeze. "He was going to try something, wasn't he?" she said quietly. "Nothing we couldn't handle," Marcus replied, but she noticed that he didn't deny her assessment. As the evening wound down and guests began departing for their accommodations, Zaratil found herself surrounded by Marcus's extended family. Aunts and uncles and cousins who had traveled from across Earth to attend the wedding, all of them welcoming her with the same warmth she had experienced from his parents. "Tomorrow you become one of us officially," Marcus's grandmother told her, taking her hands in her aged but strong grip. "But, honey, you should know that we've already been claiming you as family for weeks." "What does that mean?" Zaratil asked. The elderly woman's eyes sparkled with mischief and something much more dangerous. "It means that anyone who wants to hurt you has to go through all of us first. And, sweetie, we've been protecting our own for a very long time." As they drove home that evening, Zaratil reflected on how completely her understanding of power had changed since arriving on Earth. She had grown up believing that power came from military might, political influence, and the ability to impose one's will on others. Now she understood that the greatest power in the universe was the willingness to sacrifice everything for the people you loved. And, tomorrow, she would officially join the family that had turned that principle into the most effective force the galaxy had ever seen. She was no longer afraid of her future. Instead, she felt sorry for anyone who might be foolish enough to threaten it. The morning of her wedding day, Princess Zaratil woke before dawn with a strange sense of anticipation that had nothing to do with nervousness. As she stood at the window of Marcus's family home, watching the sun rise over the Pacific Ocean, she realized that she was no longer thinking of this as a political arrangement. Somewhere over the past month, it had become something much more personal. Elena knocked softly on her door. "May I come in, dear?" "Of course," Zaratil called, turning from the window. Marcus's mother entered carrying a tray with tea and what appeared to be a small wrapped package. She set the tray on the bedside table and handed Zaratil the package with a warm smile. "A wedding gift from David and me," Elena explained. "Something borrowed, as human tradition requires." Zaratil unwrapped the package carefully, revealing a delicate silver necklace with a pendant that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. The design was unlike anything she had seen before, elegant but somehow purposeful. "It's beautiful," she said, holding it up to catch the morning light. "It belonged to my grandmother," Elena said softly. "She wore it on her wedding day, and so did I. It's been in our family for 5 generations." Zaratil felt tears forming in her eyes. "Elena, I can't accept something so precious." "Of course you can. You're family now." Elena took the necklace and fastened it around Zaratil's neck. "There. Perfect." As the pendant settled against her throat, Zaratil felt a strange tingling sensation, as if the jewelry was somehow alive. "What is it made of?" she asked. Elena's expression grew slightly mysterious. "Let's just say it's a family heirloom with some special properties. It will help keep you safe." Before Zaratil could ask what that meant, there was another knock at the door. This time it was Marcus's cousin Sarah, followed by 3 other women she had met at the rehearsal. "Time to get ready," Sarah announced cheerfully. "We've got 5 hours to turn you into the most beautiful bride Earth has ever seen." The next several hours passed in a blur of activity. Zaratil's wedding dress was a masterpiece of both human and Valdorian design, incorporating elements from both cultures in a way that honored her heritage while symbolizing her adoption into Marcus's family. The human women fussed over every detail, treating her preparation with the same serious attention she had seen them apply to security arrangements. As they worked, they told her stories about Marcus's childhood, shared embarrassing anecdotes about his adolescence, and explained various human wedding traditions. Zaratil found herself laughing more than she had in years. "You know," Sarah said as she arranged Zaratil's hair, "Marcus was always the serious one in the family. Even as a kid, he was constantly worrying about everyone else's safety and happiness. We were starting to think he'd never find someone who could appreciate that about him." What do you mean? Zaratiel asked. Most people find human protectiveness overwhelming, Elena explained. They don't understand that it comes from love, not possessiveness. But, you seem to get it. I'm beginning to, Zaratiel admitted. 2 hours before the ceremony, Marcus's father appeared at the door with a serious expression. Ladies, I need to speak with Zara privately for a moment, he said. The women exchanged glances but didn't question the request. Once they were alone, David's demeanor shifted to something she had seen in him only once before, during a conversation about defensive strategies. Zara, there's been a development, he said quietly. What kind of development? Intelligence indicates that the hegemony may be planning something for today. We've intercepted communications suggesting they view the ceremony as an opportunity. Zaratiel felt ice form in her stomach. An opportunity for what? We're not entirely sure, but we're taking precautions. I want you to understand that no matter what happens today, you'll be protected. But there may be moments when you need to trust us completely and follow instructions without question. What kind of instructions? David's eyes grew hard. If any member of our security team tells you to get down, drop to the ground immediately. If anyone tells you to run, run as fast as you can in the direction they point. And if anyone tells you to stay close to Marcus, don't leave his side for any reason. The wedding preparations suddenly took on a different atmosphere. Zaratiel realized that the careful attention to detail wasn't just about making her beautiful, it was about keeping her safe. The women around her were arranging her dress in ways that would allow for quick movement if necessary. The jewelry they selected was not just decorative but functional, including Elena's necklace, which she now suspected contained some kind of protective technology. An hour before the ceremony, Marcus arrived to escort her to the venue. When he saw her in her wedding dress, his expression made every moment of preparation worthwhile. You're stunning, he said simply. Thank you. You look rather handsome yourself. Marcus wore formal human attire that somehow managed to look both elegant and practical. Zaratiel noticed subtle modifications in his clothing that suggested it was more than ceremonial dress. Ready for this? He asked, offering his arm. More ready than I thought I'd be, she replied honestly. The wedding venue had been transformed into something magical. The natural amphitheater overlooked the ocean, decorated with flowers from both Earth and Valdoria. Representatives from hundreds of worlds filled the seating areas, creating a gathering unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. As they approached the altar, Zaratiel became aware of the security presence Marcus had mentioned. Human personnel were positioned throughout the venue with military precision, their presence so seamlessly integrated into the ceremony that most guests would never notice them. The ceremony itself was a beautiful fusion of human and Valdorian traditions. Zaratiel found herself genuinely moved by the vows, particularly when Marcus spoke about his promise to protect and cherish her for the rest of their lives. When it came time for her own vows, she spoke from her heart about finding not just a husband but a family that had welcomed her completely. As they exchanged rings, she felt the pendant around her neck grow slightly warm. Looking up at Marcus, she saw him touch something concealed beneath his formal jacket. Their eyes met, and she realized that both of them were being protected by technology she didn't understand. The ceremony proceeded smoothly until the moment when the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union. That was when Ambassador Thexlar stood up. I must respectfully object, he announced, his voice carrying clearly across the amphitheater. A murmur went through the crowd, but Zaratiel noticed that none of the humans seemed surprised. Marcus's hand found hers and squeezed gently. On what grounds? The officiant asked formally. On the grounds that this marriage violates the hegemony's existing treaty rights regarding the Valdorian succession, Thexlar declared. Princess Zaratiel is promised to crown Prince Vexthor of the hegemony under agreements made before her birth. Zaratiel stared at the ambassador in shock. That's impossible. No such treaty exists. I have the documentation right here, Thexlar said, producing a crystalline data storage device. Signed by both governments 27 years ago. Marcus stepped slightly in front of Zaratiel, his movement so subtle that it looked natural to most observers. But she could feel the change in his posture, and she noticed that every human in the venue had suddenly become very alert. Ambassador, Marcus said politely, this is neither the time nor the place for legal disputes. If you have concerns about the validity of this marriage, they can be addressed through proper diplomatic channels after the ceremony. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Thexlar replied. According to hegemony law, Princess Zaratiel must be taken into protective custody immediately to prevent her from entering into an invalid marriage contract. As he spoke, Zaratiel noticed that several of the guests from various hegemony worlds had begun moving toward the altar. They moved like soldiers, not diplomats. That's an interesting interpretation of galactic law, said a new voice. Everyone turned to see Admiral Sarah Chen, Marcus's aunt, approaching from the back of the amphitheater. She wore the formal uniform of the Earth Defense Force, and her presence seemed to fill the entire space. Ambassador Thexlar, she continued pleasantly, I'm curious about this treaty you've mentioned. Could you tell me which government official signed it on behalf of the Valdorian Empire? Thexlar's confident expression flickered slightly. Emperor Valdros himself, naturally. Interesting, Admiral Chen mused. Because according to our records, Emperor Valdros died 28 years ago. 1 year before the treaty you're citing was allegedly signed. A deadly silence fell over the amphitheater. Zaratiel felt her blood run cold as she realized what the Admiral was saying. Furthermore, Admiral Chen continued, her voice taking on an edge that made the air itself seem dangerous, our intelligence analysis of that data crystal shows it was fabricated using hegemony technology, with forged signatures created less than 72 hours ago. Thexlar's facade finally dropped completely. You humans are too clever for your own good. And, you, Ambassador, have just attempted to abduct a member of a human family using falsified documents, Admiral Chen replied. That constitutes an act of war. The hegemony soldiers who had been moving toward the altar suddenly found themselves surrounded by humans who had appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Weapons were drawn, but not by the aggressors. Now then, Admiral Chen said conversationally, you have two choices. You can leave our space immediately and never return, or you can explain to your superiors why their invasion plan failed so spectacularly that it started a war they can't possibly win. Thexlar looked around the amphitheater, apparently realizing for the first time that he was completely outmaneuvered. Every hegemony operative was covered by at least 3 human security personnel, and escape routes had been systematically cut off. This isn't over, he snarled. Oh, but it is, Marcus said, speaking for the first time since the confrontation began. His voice was calm, but Zaratiel could hear something in it that made her shiver. You see, Ambassador, you just threatened my wife in front of my entire family. That's a mistake you'll never have the opportunity to make again. Your wife isn't yet, Thexlar said desperately. The officiant, who had been watching the entire exchange with remarkable composure, cleared his throat. By the authority vested in me by the Earth government and recognized under galactic diplomatic law, I now pronounce Marcus Chen and Princess Zaratiel to be husband and wife. He looked directly at Thexlar. The marriage is complete and legally binding. Marcus turned to Zaratiel and kissed her gently, and she felt the pendant around her neck grow warm again. Looking out at the crowd, she saw thousands of faces watching them with expressions of joy and fierce protectiveness. Welcome to the family, Mrs. Chen, Marcus whispered against her lips. As hegemony personnel were escorted from the venue under heavy guard, Zaratiel realized that she had just witnessed something unprecedented. The most powerful military alliance in the galaxy had just attempted to kidnap her, and it had been stopped not by superior firepower or political maneuvering, but by a family that refused to allow anyone to harm one of their own. The reception that followed was unlike anything she could have imagined. Representatives from hundreds of worlds congratulated her and Marcus, many of them expressing relief that the hegemony situation had been resolved so definitively. What happens now? She asked Marcus as they danced under the stars. Now you get to spend the rest of your life learning what it means to be part of a human family, he replied. Starting with our honeymoon on the lunar colonies. And the hegemony? Marcus's expression grew serious. They'll never bother you again. Today they learned that attacking human families has consequences they can't afford to pay. As the evening continued, Zaratiel found herself surrounded by her new extended family, each of them sharing stories and welcoming her with genuine warmth. She finally understood what Marcus had meant about human love being complete and unconditional. She had married for political reasons, but she had gained something far more valuable, a place in the most protective family in the universe. And, as she watched the stars appear over the Pacific Ocean, she felt truly safe for the first time in her life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she was exactly where she belonged. 6 months after her wedding, Zaratiel Chen stood on the observation deck of the Earth Defense Station, watching a fleet of hegemony vessels approach under a flag of truce. The irony wasn't lost on her that the same people who had tried to kidnap her at her wedding were now coming to beg for mercy. "Nervous?" Marcus asked, joining her at the viewport. "Should I be?" she replied, though they both knew the answer. The past 6 months had been a revelation. Zaratiel had learned that marrying into a human family meant joining a network that spanned the entire galaxy. She received regular communications from humans on distant worlds, all checking on her well-being and sharing news from their own lives. When she had mentioned missing certain foods from Valdoria, packages had arrived within days from human traders who had gone out of their way to acquire them. More importantly, she had learned that the protection Marcus promised came with responsibilities as well as privileges. "The hegemony delegation is requesting permission to come aboard," reported Commander Williams from the communications station. "Grant them permission," Marcus replied. "But maintain full security protocols." Zaratiel watched as the hegemony shuttle approached their docking bay. The delegation included High Chancellor Vorthake himself, the supreme leader of the hegemony. The fact that he had come personally spoke to the desperation of their situation. "Ready to find out what they want?" Marcus asked. "I think I already know," Zaratiel said grimly. They made their way to the conference room where the delegation would be received. Admiral Sarah Chen was already there, along with representatives from Earth's diplomatic corps and military command. The setup was carefully orchestrated to demonstrate human unity while maintaining an atmosphere of civilized discussion. When the hegemony delegation entered, Zaratiel was struck by how much they had changed since the wedding. High Chancellor Vorthake looked haggard, his reptilian features drawn with exhaustion. The arrogance that had characterized Ambassador Thexlar was completely absent. "High Chancellor," Admiral Chen said formally, "welcome to Earth Station 1. Please, be seated." Vorthake took his place across from the human delegation, his eyes settling immediately on Zaratiel. "Princess." "I apologize, Mrs. Chen." "You look well." "I am well, thank you," she replied coolly. "I suppose you're wondering why we've come," Vorthake continued. "We have some ideas," Marcus said pleasantly. "But, please, enlighten us." The High Chancellor took a deep breath before speaking. "The hegemony formally requests that humans cease all military operations against our territories and vessels." Admiral Chen raised an eyebrow. "What military operations would those be, High Chancellor?" "You know perfectly well what I'm referring to," Vorthake said with a flash of his old irritation. "Our ships are being systematically disabled throughout the galaxy. Our communications networks are being infiltrated. Our supply lines are being disrupted." "That does sound inconvenient," Admiral Chen agreed sympathetically. "Have you considered filing a complaint with the Galactic Security Council?" "We tried that," Vorthake replied bitterly. "They told us that human actions were entirely within the bounds of galactic law, since they were responding to the hegemony's unprovoked attack on a human family member." Zaratiel leaned forward slightly. "Is that what happened at my wedding? An unprovoked attack?" "Mrs. Chen, surely you understand that our actions were based on legitimate legal concerns." "Your actions," Marcus interrupted quietly, "were based on forged documents and an attempt to kidnap my wife. There were no legitimate legal concerns. Furthermore," Admiral Chen added, "our intelligence analysis has confirmed that the hegemony was planning a full-scale invasion of the Valdorian Empire, with Mrs. Chen's assassination as the opening move." High Chancellor Vorthake's expression darkened. "You can't prove that." "Actually, we can," said a new voice from the entrance to the conference room. Everyone turned to see a figure that made Vorthake's face go pale. It was General Mordhack, but he was wearing the insignia of the Earth Defense Force rather than his traditional Valdorian uniform. "General Mordhack," Zaratiel said with genuine pleasure. It's wonderful to see you. The pleasure is mine, Your Highness, Morthak replied with a bow. Though I believe the proper address is now Admiral Morthak. Admiral, she asked in surprise. I accepted a commission with Earth Defense Force 3 months ago, Morthak explained. It seemed like the best way to serve the interests of my people, given our new alliance with humanity. High Chancellor Vorthake stared at the Valdorian general in shock. You defected to the humans? I joined the only military force in the galaxy that's truly committed to protecting the innocent, Morthak corrected. And, in the process, I brought certain information that might interest you. The general activated a holographic display that showed detailed schematics of hegemony military installations and troop movements. These are the invasion plans your government developed for the conquest of Valdoria, Morthak said matter-of-factly. Phase 1 involved the assassination of Princess Zaratiel to destabilize the Valdorian government. Phase 2 was a coordinated attack on our outer colonies. Phase 3 was a full invasion of our home system. Vorthake said nothing, but his silence was confirmation enough. The interesting thing about these plans, Admiral Chen observed, is that they violate about 14 different galactic peace treaties. Any one of which would justify military intervention by concerned parties. Such as humans who don't like seeing their family members threatened, Marcus added. High Chancellor Vorthake looked around the table, apparently realizing that he was completely outmaneuvered. What do you want? An excellent question, Admiral Chen said. Mrs. Chen, since you're the injured party, perhaps you'd like to answer? All eyes turned to Zaratiel, and she felt a moment of uncertainty. 6 months ago, she had been a sheltered princess with no real experience in galactic politics. Now she was being asked to help determine the fate of one of the largest military powers in known space. High Chancellor, she said finally, I want to understand something. Why did you target me specifically? What made you think that killing one Valdorian princess would be worth starting a war with humanity? Vorthake's expression grew uncomfortable. We didn't know about humanity's protective nature regarding family members. Our intelligence indicated that humans were isolationists who avoided galactic conflicts. So you thought you could commit genocide against my people without consequences, Zaratiel said quietly. It wasn't genocide, Vorthake protested. It was strategic conquest. Standard galactic politics. Standard galactic politics, Marcus repeated slowly. You mean the kind where stronger civilizations prey on weaker ones without regard for the lives destroyed in the process? That's how the galaxy works, Vorthake said defensively. Not anymore, Admiral Chen said firmly. High Chancellor, I want you to understand something very clearly. The galaxy now contains a civilization that refuses to accept standard politics when they result in the suffering of innocent people. What are you saying? I'm saying that humans have decided to take an active role in galactic affairs, Admiral Chen explained. We're done standing by while bullies terrorize smaller civilizations. The implications hit Vorthake like a physical blow. You're talking about reshaping the entire galactic order. We're talking about creating a galaxy where strength is used to protect the weak instead of exploiting them, Marcus said. Where treaties are honored and smaller worlds don't live in fear of conquest. That's impossible, Vorthake said desperately. The logistics alone, the number of conflicts you'd have to mediate, the cost. High Chancellor, Zaratiel interrupted softly, you're making the same mistake everyone makes when dealing with humans. You're thinking about this in terms of cost and benefit analysis. What other way is there to think about it? In terms of right and wrong, she replied simply. Humans don't calculate whether protecting someone is cost-effective. They do it because it's the right thing to do. Admiral Chen nodded approvingly. Very well said, Mrs. Chen. High Chancellor, here's what's going to happen. The hegemony will withdraw all forces from Valdorian space immediately. You will pay reparations for the damage caused by your invasion preparations. And you will submit to ongoing monitoring by human peacekeeping forces. And if we refuse? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Marcus leaned forward slightly, and, when he spoke, his voice carried the same deadly certainty Zaratiel had heard at their wedding. High Chancellor, 6 months ago your people tried to kidnap my wife. Since then, we've been very patient. We've limited ourselves to defensive actions and economic pressure. But, if you force us to take more direct measures. He didn't finish the threat, but he didn't need to. Everyone in the room understood exactly what humanity was capable of when pushed too far. How long do we have to comply? Vorthe K asked quietly. 72 hours, Admiral Chen replied. After that, we'll assume you've chosen to continue hostilities. The hegemony delegation departed with visible relief, clearly grateful to escape with their lives and government intact. As the conference room emptied, Zaratil found herself alone with Marcus and Admiral Chen. Did we just threaten to conquer the hegemony? She asked. We threatened to defend innocent people from conquest, Admiral Chen corrected. There's a difference. Is there really? Marcus took her hand gently. Zara, what would you have done if you had the power to stop the hegemony from destroying your people? Anything necessary, she replied without hesitation. Then, you understand, he said simply. The difference is that humans have the power to actually do something about galactic bullies. The question is whether we should use that power to protect people or whether we should stand aside and let atrocities happen because it's not our business. Zaratil thought about her own people, safely going about their lives on Valdoria because humanity had decided they were worth protecting. She thought about countless other worlds throughout the galaxy where people lived in fear of stronger neighbors. So this is what you meant about joining your family, she said slowly. It's not just about being protected. It's about becoming someone who protects others. Now you're getting it, Admiral Chen said with a smile. Welcome to the family business, Mrs. Chen. 3 days later, reports began coming in from across the galaxy. The hegemony had withdrawn from Valdorian space. Reparations were being negotiated through proper diplomatic channels. And, for the first time in galactic history, a major power had backed down from a conflict not because they were defeated, but because they realized they were morally wrong. That evening, Zaratil and Marcus sat on their apartment balcony, watching the sunset over San Francisco Bay. Ships from dozens of worlds moved through Earth's orbital traffic, bringing diplomats, traders, and refugees seeking human protection. Any regrets? Marcus asked. Zaratil considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, she had been a princess whose biggest concern was which dress to wear to state dinners. Now she was part of a family that had taken responsibility for peace and justice throughout the galaxy. None at all, she said finally. Though I do have one question. What's that? When you said I'd learn what it means to be part of a human family, exactly how much of the galaxy are we planning to adopt? Marcus laughed, a sound of pure joy that carried across the water. As much as needs adopting, I suppose. That could be quite a lot of work. Lucky for us, humans don't mind hard work when it's for family. Zaratil leaned against her husband's shoulder and watched the stars appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, countless beings were sleeping safely because humanity had decided they were worth protecting. The marriage had been meant to stop a war. Instead, it had started something much more important, a new age where the strong protected the weak, where justice mattered more than power, and where love and loyalty could reshape the entire galaxy. She had married into the most dangerous family in the universe. She had also married into the most loving one. And, as the night settled around them, Zaratil Chen smiled at the knowledge that she would spend the rest of her life helping to make the galaxy a place where no one had to face their monsters alone. The stars shone down on Earth, on Valdoria, on countless worlds throughout the galaxy. And, for the first time in galactic history, they shone on a universe where being someone's family meant something more powerful than any weapon ever created. The marriage was complete. The real work was just beginning.